It's a double whammy for the Bucks as they lose to the Sixers despite Giannis putting up 52, and then they're expected to lose Malcolm Brogdon for 6 to 8 weeks. That's going to hurt them a lot on the perimeter, Max.
Yep.
How much does this injury change your outlook on how the East is now going to play out?
Totally changes it back to my original outlook. I mean, look,
Yeah.
First of all, there are a lot of deadline deals and everything, but the Bucks have basically been the best team in the NBA wire to wire. And Brogdon, who looked like a Rookie of the Year pick based on the fact that not everyone played a full season, he put up some counting numbers. I didn't really believe in him early on, but boy, he has proven himself to be an excellent player. And his absence is a big deal for the Bucks. I mean, you even saw Jimmy Butler get really hot in the fourth quarter when the Sixers beat him. And I think a lot of that's not just that Butler is a very, very good player with a real will to win, but Brogdon's not there, So, where's the perimeter defense coming from? Not to mention the shooting. I think in a tight Eastern Conference, this brings me back to Toronto, Stephen A. But I want to say something quickly about that game. Embiid, the defense he played on the Freak was insane. And this dude, I was saying a lot, if he wants to elevate himself from top 10 to, maybe the best player in the league, he's got to be a better second half of the game player, a better player in the playoffs. And you brought up the fact that maybe he's limited in practice to the point where he can't get himself into that kind of shape. And I still worry about his health. But the only thing stopping this dude from being the best player in basketball is his health, I believe. This guy was unbelievable. And that job he did on the Freak was amazing.
Well, there's a few unbelievable players in the NBA, and I think it's debatable as to whether or not he would be the best. He'd be there. He'd be in the conversation, no doubt about it. I give credit where credit's due. Also going to give credit to the Philadelphia 76ers who won 4 straight. You look at a guy like Jimmy Butler. You look at Tobias Harris and the acquisition of those two guys with Embiid, with Ben Simmons, who, by the way, has got heart. Ain't scared of nothing. He just needs to work on his jump shot. My Lord, if that happens, Philadelphia's going to win a championship in the near future. Having said all of that, I'm not changing my position one bit. What happened to Brogdon doesn't affect me one way or another because I never jumped off the Boston Celtics bandwagon. I've been a believer in the Boston Celtics. I still am a believer in the Boston Celtics. I know that there's trepidation because you look at Boston and you're like, you don't just turn it on. I believe they're one of those teams that can turn it on because they're not going against anybody experienced outside of Kawhi Leonard. That can be that's a difference maker because Kawhi Leonard is not only phenomenal, but he's also somebody that's a champion and an NBA Finals MVP. So he's been there, he's done it. I got that. But I just look at Boston, their youth, their athleticism. I think that Brad Stevens is a good enough coach because I think he's damn good. And he's a good enough coach where some of the things that were transpiring during the regular season, he's slowly but surely transitioning in the playoff mode, working out his rotation, getting those guys going. I also think Gordon Hayward being on concussion protocol is helpful in this sense because with him gone, now those other guys that were there last year when he wasn't there get to reinsert themselves, and revitalize themselves in
Kyrie,
that Boston Celtics lineup with Kyrie Irving. So I'm of the mindset. I know that Boston is a 5th seed. I think they will catch Indiana for the 4th seed. I think obviously that means they go against Milwaukee in the second round. I think they would beat Milwaukee and Toronto.
Without
Philly would be waiting.
I think that you might wind up being right. I think it's going to, or I might be with the Raptors, because when you look at the Raptors and the guys they can even bring off the bench at this point, they are formidable. And Kawhi's a former Finals MVP.
That's right.
But I think the Bucks were going to beat everybody. There's no way to tell now.
I never felt that way.
Brogdon is a huge loss for them because the Bucks were never as deep on paper, at least, as the Celtics or the Raptors. They could least afford an injury to a key player, and that's a key player that really hurts them. I'll say this about Antetokounmpo. What happened with him and Simmons when he backs him down, dunks on him, says he's just a baby. He's right. Simmons is a baby freak. He's a baby Greek freak. He's where Greek freak was a couple years ago. Here it is. He's just those are man bones dunking on a younger kid, right? Now Simmons came right back on him on the alley-oop on the other end and then had something to say to the Greek freak. But when he was on Simmons and vice versa, he had a much better time than with Embiid, which is saying something considering how much wiggle the freak has in his game.
2 points I wanted to make. Number one, when he dunked on Simmons and screamed, Joel Embiid was trying to get the ref to give him a tech. I appreciate the fact that the refs didn't do that. My whole point is let him play. You understand what I'm saying? As long as ain't no violence going on, let him talk trash. The fans love that.
Oh, there was violence. That dunk was violence.
Well, you call it whatever you want. Number two, you raved about Embiid's defense. And that's just a small example of why I'm telling you I believe that Milwaukee would get taken out. Budenholzer is an exceptional coach. Greek Freak's a freak, phenomenal talent. But when playoff basketball arrives, the game slows, defenses get back, they're able to suffocate the lane. They force you to show them a game that extends beyond 10 feet. And I think that is what will doom Milwaukee.
That was one. I'll say this.
But Milwaukee.
One of the reasons Horford was able to do Embiid as he did was, one, I really do think at this point, when Embiid doesn't look like he's in shape in the second half of games or in the playoffs, I think that has to do with limited practice based on trying to preserve his health and all that, and that just is what it is. But you're right, Horford also has an outside game. He can get you in so many different ways. That is not the Greek Freak. It's different. And so any little adjustment in that team downward, which is without Brogdon, a huge one, and I got to go back to my original pick, which is the Toronto Raptors.
I will say it's not easy to beat Milwaukee in Milwaukee, though. That crowd, it's, you know, I mean, the Brewers, they don't get me wrong, Green Bay's up the road, but the bottom line is that crowd is formidable, and they'll probably have home court advantage, so let's not ignore that.
They hung around in that game. I mean, Embiid, I talk about his defense. His offense was so good. He was hitting, he was canning threes under pressure, cool and calm. And if it wasn't for that kind of play, the Bucks come back and beat him.
Yeah, Brogdon quietly on pace to just become the 7th player ever to have a 50, 40, 90 season. So really impressive. And even with that,
good player.
Without him, the Bucks are still the favorites to win the East, followed by the Raptors.